The Verdict, a Sidebar production, hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crow and Dunleavy sponsors The Verdict. Also sponsored by Delta Dental, Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, and C.H. Guernsey and Company. Each week on The Verdict, we present an objective discussion of contemporary and legal issues, topical issues that will affect Oklahomans in their daily lives. The Verdict, a Sidebar production.
And welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett, and I am joined, as always, by one of Oklahoma's top legal experts, Kent Myers. Kent, another good show lined up today.
I think so. It's time for us to talk some specifics about Oklahoma's finances. We hear all the time that there's a budget deficit, that we don't have enough money coming in, that our revenue projections are not being met, and that cuts are going to have to be made. And that's about the extent of the depth into which most of us get into this. Today we're going to try to do a little better than that. We've got Scott Meacham, the Director of Office of State Finance and Revenue for Oklahoma, and Governor Henry's Cabinet Secretary in that regard, to join us to talk about just how bad is it, and where are we likely to see cuts, and what's going to have to happen to not make this a total fiscal disaster for Oklahoma. So it is a necessary subject, but one that isn't necessarily pleasant to listen to, but one that we need to know about.
Well, I can't imagine any viewer out there doesn't have some questions, and this is the guy that can have the answers for
And
us.
all of our viewers have a stake in the answer.
Didn't say he had a solution to every problem, but he's probably got the answer to the question.
I bet he does.
All right. This morning, a look at Oklahoma's financial future. You're watching The Verdict. We'll be right back.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
The Verdict is pleased to have as a sponsor C.H. Guernsey and Company, providing architectural and engineering services to clients throughout the U.S. and around the world.
American Express Tax and Business Services. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. American Express Tax and Business Services. In Oklahoma City, the phone number is 405-843-5311.
And Blankenship has stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leading at 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go for it. Wiggins had to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick is away.
All children deserve a life of hope and love. But sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers is going to introduce our guest.
We're pleased to have Scott Meacham with us today. Scott is the Director of Office of State Finance and the Secretary of Finance and Revenue for the Governor. Scott has a BBA, Bachelor of Business Administration from the University of Oklahoma in Finance, Master's of Business Administration, and a Juris Doctorate degree, all from the University of Oklahoma. Has been a practicing lawyer, has been a banker, running a bank out in Elk City, and was named by Governor Henry to come in and take on this job at a very tough time, I might add, as Director of Office of State Finance. Scott, thanks so much for joining us here on The Verdict.
Thank you for having me.
And give my regards to your dad and your mother, will you?
I will.
Good. Tell us, Mick and I were a little surprised talking to you before the show started about the Office of State Finance, its size, what it does, how many employees it has. Tell our viewers about the office that you run.
It's really a pretty large office, and it does a lot more than most people are aware. There's well over 100 employees in the office. Everybody hears about our budget function. I mean, we have the job of assisting the governor and preparing his executive budget and handling the budget process. But there's also a lot of other things we do. We handle all the state's accounting. We're basically the state's accounting firm. We approve claims, we audit claims, we do all that. We do financial reporting, all the state's financial reporting we handle. Plus, we're over the state's telecommunications network and the state's computer network.
My goodness. Well, I had no earthly idea that you had that many obligations to take care of. Let me ask you a follow-up question to that. Do you have a deputy or do you have an assistant that works? Who is that?
I have a deputy director. Her name's Allison Frazier.
And she's been with the office a while, or she new also?
No, she's been with the office a while, about 7 years, I think.
Well, Scott, we hear the budget problem, and we hear it's bad, but just how bad is it? What's the current state, speaking to us this week, what's the current state of the budget?
Well, the current fiscal year, we had a revenue shortfall, which caused the 6.5% across-the-board cuts that you've read about in the papers and everything. And we're trying to hold on and make it to the end of the fiscal year without having to do more cuts.
That's to June 30?
Yes. But
between now and June 30. Yeah,
right.
All right.
I mean, it's very possible we might have to do more cuts between now and June 30th if we don't start seeing some numbers improve.
Mm-hmm.
Now, next fiscal year, we know already that we have $677 million less to spend than we spent this fiscal year.
Even with the 6%? I mean,
well,
the year we spent 6%.
Yeah, it's additional $325 million over that we have to deal with. But to put it in historical perspective, you know, everybody looks at the oil bust as being kind of the low point in Oklahoma history.
Like 1982, that
right,
area.
82, 83, in that area. And back then, we went back and did some research, and before this year was back then, and the most reduction they had was $280 million. So we're doing almost 3 times that this year. I mean, it's just unprecedented in our state's history.
Well, let me follow up on that a little bit, kind of relating it to Penn Square. During that Penn Square time, from starting in 82 up through the mid-80s, we not only saw state government with revenue shortfalls, but we saw a lot of private businesses, including banks, having an awful lot of difficulty. And the revenue shortfall now is greater than it was then. Should we expect difficulty in the private sector greater or equal to what we saw during Penn Square, or is it going to have that kind of an effect?
I think you've already seen it, but I think it's been different. I think you know, if you look at Oklahoma City's economy, it's been somewhat insulated from what's been going on in the rest of the state. Oklahoma City's economy has been pretty good, and it's kind of held its own.
Why is that?
I think it's just the nature of the diversification in Oklahoma City's economy. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at Tulsa, though, it's the other end of the spectrum. Tulsa got hit first by the decline in the telecommunications industry because they were so strong in telecommunications. Then they got hit by the decline in the oil and gas industry because those are their 2 big industries. You know, Oklahoma City hasn't had that problem. In the rural sectors, or the rural areas, we've been hit by the declines in the oil and gas sector plus ag. So, you know, Oklahoma City's kind of held its own, but the rest of the state has been suffering. I mean, we read about every day in the paper about layoffs, plant closings, you know, consolidations and whatnot. So it's definitely been an impact.
Well, we talk about revenue being down. Can you be a little more specific about what are the major, not minor, but major sources of revenue the state gets? They all aren't the same. No. Which ones are down most?
Okay. We have 4 main components of revenues. We have sales tax revenue, income tax revenue, gross production tax revenue, and motor vehicle tax revenue. Okay, so there's 4 components. 3 of those 4 components have been down. The only thing that we've been doing good on is gross production tax.
Give me an example of gross production tax. Where
Well,
did that come from?
gross production tax is the tax, the state assesses a 7% tax on oil and gas production in the state of Oklahoma. We've been doing well there because prices have been very good. If you, in case you haven't heard and read in the papers lately.
Or noticed at the pump.
Yeah, or noticed at the pumps. Oil and gas prices have been very strong, and so that source has been very good for us and has helped at least partially offset the declines in the other areas. Sales tax and income tax are our main 2 revenue sources that have been down. And last month, our income tax numbers were very disappointing.
What is the sales tax rate from the state?
4.5%.
Okay, so 4.5% of the total sales tax that people pay goes to the state. Other goes to the city, is usually, and then some other places. Okay.
And those 2 revenue sources, sales tax and income taxes, are barometers of how your economy is doing.
Yeah.
You know, when your economy is doing better, more people are buying things, more people are, you know, making more money, and both of those 2 sources go up. When the economy does bad, they go down, and that's what we've been seeing.
Well, with revenue down, is there any expectation from your office that the legislature or the people are likely to do anything to raise revenue?
Well, Governor Henry has consistently said that the way to get out of this budget crisis is not to tax our way out with general sales tax increases or income tax increases. We believe the thing to do is to grow our way out of the problems. Now, we believe that we need to do obviously some cuts, and there's some revenue enhancement ideas that we have out there, but we don't believe in broad-based general tax increases as the answer.
Zero-based budgeting, I've heard. We've talked about the revenue side being down, but of course the expenditure side is what eats up the revenue you bring in.
Right.
And I've heard the governor talk about zero-based budgeting. Can you explain to our viewers how that differs from how budgeting has been done in the past?
I think the easiest thing is if you start with the way it was done in the past. And what it was done in the past is basically what I would call rolling budgeting. You take last year's numbers, you roll them over into this year, and then you add to it any programs or services. And once in, you know, a great while, there'll be a request for some decreases. But, you know, that's against human nature, and that's against the nature of bureaucracies to ask you to take any money away. So generally what happens is you kind of have this budget creep where you roll it over each year, and it continues to grow and grow. What zero-based budgeting does is it says, okay, let's start at ground zero. Let's start at a budget of 0 for your agency. Now let's justify every program we're doing, every service we're doing, and let's add to it then based on the programs and services that are still meeting their purposes.
Let me jump in here and get us to a short break. We're visiting with Scott Meacham, Governor Henry's Secretary of Finance and Revenue. You're watching The Verdict.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
We are C.H. Guernsey and Company. We provide engineering, architecture, and consulting services to clients across the nation and around the world. Our corporate headquarters are located in Oklahoma City, and we have branch offices across the country, including Tulsa. We have provided quality service to clients for nearly 75 years. At Guernsey, we believe in quality work and unconditional client satisfaction. To learn more about C.H. Guernsey and Company, log on to our website at chguernsey.com.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
I enrich our cultural landscape.
I help define our quality of life.
I am one of 4,000 artists in central Oklahoma who receive support from Allied Arts, this community's united arts organization.
I am.
I am.
I am an allied artist.
And welcome back. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're back on The Verdict, and we're talking to Governor Henry's Secretary of Finance and Revenue, Scott Meacham. Kent, where do we go from here?
Scott, I've heard for years and years about Oklahoma's balanced budget requirement. Tell our viewers what that is, where that comes from, and what it means.
Well, unlike the federal government, by Constitution, the state of Oklahoma cannot spend more than it takes in. And that's why we had to have the cuts this year during the year. The legislature passed a budget and a level of appropriations, but we didn't collect that much, so we couldn't give the state agencies that much money. That's basically it.
Well, it's really more than a balanced budget requirement, isn't it? I mean, you come into the budget at the beginning of the year, you're estimating revenues,
right,
and you say, I'm going to give corrections this many millions of dollars based upon my estimated revenue. But if the revenue doesn't meet it, you can't do it just because you budgeted it and it was balanced at the time.
Right.
You've got to make it come out based upon actual revenue as well.
Exactly.
So it causes a problem both at the beginning and perhaps at the
Well,
end.
and like you saw during the year this year, you have to make across-the-board cuts when you have a revenue shortfall, which maybe isn't the most efficient or effective way to make cuts.
Well, what in these days that we're dealing with, unless we have some innovative solutions that haven't come forward so far, what's it likely to mean for departments within Oklahoma if we have this continued revenue shortfall?
Well, for the rest of this fiscal year, if we can do about where we're estimating, we don't have to make any more cuts. Okay. Now
that takes us to June 30.
Right. Now we're dealing with the legislature with next year's appropriations for the next fiscal year, and the problem is the governor proposed an executive budget that was balanced. Well, since then, we lost $85 million through the certification going down once again by the Board of Equalization, and we had another item in the budget that that didn't pan out that we thought would work. And then we have some revenue proposals out there that the legislature has to pass. And we did some estimating, the Office of State Finance did, as far as what would the budget look like, assuming that we have to, make up that gap, which we do, assuming the legislature does not pass the revenue enhancements, and assuming you hold education, prisons, and health care authority about where they are in the governor's current budget. And what we saw was that we would have to make cuts in the other areas of government from 20 to 30%.
Can you give me some examples?
Well, we have, for example, the DAs. We'd have to cut 27%. This is from 2002 fiscal year levels, okay? 27% cuts. Department of Public Safety, 29%. District courts, 19%. It just goes on. And the reason is because so many of your dollars go to education, health care, and prisons. And that means that these other areas that take relatively fewer dollars have to take bigger cuts to make up the difference.
So the people of Oklahoma may really see a difference in services that are available to be rendered if we have to implement these kinds of cuts in courts, in Department of Public Safety, et cetera.
Well, you're talking up to a third of employees going away in some of these areas. And, and I stress that we're working with the legislature on this, and we hope that the legislature will be willing to work with us and take action to avoid this. But if something happens they don't, that's what we're looking at.
What can we do to make things better?
Well,
what kind of initiatives can we
Yeah,
have?
I think the governor has put out a broad-ranging plan because he believes the way to get out of this is to grow our way out of it. One thing we can do, though, to avoid going down this road again is to bolster our rainy day fund and don't allow the piggy bank to be robbed quite so easily. And the governor has an initiative out there to make it be required to be used as a true stabilization element, is what it was intended for. The other things we have are more economic growth incentives and development incentives. And we have been meeting with, and we're about ready to roll out a economic development incentive that the governor is doing in conjunction with higher ed with assistance of the Department of Commerce, we're going to try to come up with a blueprint for economic growth and development for Oklahoma. And that's one of the things we're
Who's involved in that besides your office?
Well, obviously, I'm involved with it. The governor's office and staff is involved with it. Department of Commerce is involved with it. And the chancellor, our new chancellor of higher ed, Chancellor Risser, and his staff's involved in it.
How was the transition from Governor Keating to Governor Henry, and as far as this budget shortfall? I mean, because Governor Keating got out, things were worsening, but it seemed like as soon as Governor Henry came in, all of a sudden these hard decisions had to be made. Was the transition easy for you, and as you took over from another administration?
Well, I would like to compliment the Keating administration, because across the board they did everything they could to make our jobs easier. I mean, they knew we were walking into a tough situation, and they gave us, I mean, all the help, and even more than you would probably normally expect, especially when you're going from a Republican to a Democrat administration. So, you know, I can't compliment them enough on how much they helped us. Now, obviously, we had the hard problems to deal with when we walked in there, and, you know, that's part of the challenge of this job that attracted me from the private sector, was it was such a challenge.
I'm wondering, with the war on the horizon, how that's playing into our state economy. It's on the other side of the globe, yet it seems to be impacting our economy. There's just, people are just a little bit uncertain, and it keeps them from spending money, which would be a boost to the economy.
Absolutely. I think you're seeing that nationally, and I think you're seeing it in Oklahoma. There is so much uncertainty out there about the war and about what might happen if there's a war. And the financial markets and people, when they're making economic decisions, err on the side of being conservative, which in the war scenario means that we go in and we bog down like we did in Vietnam, or like we did in the Balkans, or, you know, some of these other areas we've gone into. Obviously, if we can go in like Desert Storm, quick victory, and get out, then I think you're going to see it be a tremendous boon to the economy. But if we go in and bog down, it's going to pull the economy down. The economy is going to stay down. And right now, because of that uncertainty, the markets are erring on the conservative side.
You can look into our crystal ball here. That isn't what it is, but it can serve that purpose today. And tell our viewers where you think we'll be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever time period you'd like.
About 1 minute left.
Okay, well, I got to look past all the bubbles in the crystal ball. But, you know, I think what we're doing now is we're laying the groundwork for tremendous gains in Oklahoma's future. In business world, we know that your greatest gains come in times of adversity. And that's where we are now. We're trying to make the structural changes that allow our state to grow and prosper in the future, and I think you're going to see that.
Wow. Scott, really do thank you for coming. It's been very useful. I hope our viewers will get on the website and ask us some questions, and we can get them to you and maybe bring you back on here in the near future and kind of get another update about what's happened since the last time we had a chance to visit. So thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Kent and I'll be back with the final word after this.
Think being a big sister means you have to spend all day stuck in a library? Think again. To learn more about becoming a big brother or big sister, call 1-888-412-BIGS.
In Oklahoma, There are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
We are back on The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and what a great show, Scott Meacham.
Very good show. Scott knows what he's talking about. Governor Henry's made a very fine appointment, Scott, and I think the public will be well served by having his service over these coming years. Budget deficit is much worse than what we suffered in the Penn Square time period. We'll see how it develops. Hopefully good economic news will come around and people will start spending, and if they start spending, that helps to alleviate the shortfall of revenue at the state capitol. Time will tell, and we'll get Scott back on to tell us in a little while how that works. Different subject.
Okay.
This is our 100th show.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Same to you. I'm amazed we've been able to do it. I told somebody the other day we'd been on 100 years. It seems like we've been on 100 years, but just 100 shows. And I just want to take a minute to thank a few people. Our executive producer, Larry Blankenship, who's under the weather. And Larry, get well soon. We want you to be back here telling us what to do because we're kind of adrift without Larry. Our sponsors, Delta Dental, Crow and Dunlevy, C.H. Guernsey, Lawyers for Children, American Express Tax and Business Services, and the Journal Record have kept us on the air, and we're very grateful to them. Special thank you to our guys here at the studio, Steve Easom at KSBI, and Mike Glover, our director, and all the camera crew guys who keep us going. Also, thanks to Chris Turner and Mike Waters down at OU. We filmed our first 74 shows down at OU, and Chris Turner and Mike Waters did a great job for us down there, and we're grateful. But mainly to you viewers. If you weren't watching, we wouldn't be on, and so please keep watching because we enjoy bringing you this information. Mick, thanks so much for 100 shows.
I can't believe it's been 100 shows. It's really gone quickly. And I remember thinking, how are they going to find topics for these shows? You know, I mean, you could come up with 10, but come up with 100, and we've got a long list of shows for the future. So. Yeah,
lots lined up that we haven't yet been able to do, but we will.
There's always something to talk about.
There is.
We have a website we'd like to send you to also, theverdict.tv. Check it out. Thanks again to our guest, Scott Meacham. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time on show 101 of The Verdict.